session. We are late about 1 hour. We listened to Etienne Balibar and his comprehensive presentation, which was long though, and due to the limit time, we didn't have enough discussion. I think I will have more capacity to intervene in the panelists in this round. In the first session, I referred to two incidents. The first one is about the lifting immunity of an MP, and as he formulates, he received 90,000 votes, and it is a violation of 90,000 citizens. While he was serving as an MP, he did his best to respond to all human rights violations, all human rights issues, and his sentence was approved by the Court of Cassation, and the sentence is related to posting on social media. And of course, it is a serious turning point and groundbreaking issue for our activities. We also learned that HDP faces a new court case, and we will talk about volatile truth during the pandemic. And we will talk about how it has changed its shape and where it evolves. The first panelist is our dear colleague Burak Arıkan. Let me introduce him very briefly, and then I will give floor to him. Burak Hoca is a graduate of Yıldız Teknik University. He studied civil engineering, and he completed his MA in visual designing, and in 2004 at Istanbul University, and in 2006 he continued his program. He works on these issues to investigate into social issues. And he defines his studies as a social issues, and he has a website as Graph Commons, and also he is a founding member of several other websites, and he is part of several international initiatives. Today, he will talk about the digitalization and its data, how these data impact on our life, how these data control our life, and also he will talk about common data. Yes, the floor is yours. Thank you. I think you can hear me. We always hesitate whether participants can hear us or not whenever we are on Zoom. I would like to thank the Turkish Medical Association, and also I would like to thank our moderator Dinçer Demirkent, and also Aslı Otman, who in fact coordinated our session. I would like to begin my presentation as follows. As you know, analog aspects get slower and digital aspects get faster, and this volatile truth gets faster evaporation. So social media platforms, we use the term echo chamber, which also increased. I'm sure you might have heard the term echo chambers. I have 15 to 20 minutes, so I will be brief and fast. These activity feeds, either on Twitter, on Facebook, or YouTube, these feeds are not published on time, but according to your customized preferences. So all your actions are monitored, surveilled, and then calculated. And all your actions, activities are monitored and then categorized. This is how you receive these feedback. As a result of this, all users receive posts which are their interests. So they receive interests which are similar to their position. It is about perception, and then opinions are shaped on the basis of this issue. This is why we call it echo chamber. The interesting point is that why do we have it? Because social media platforms usually form categorizations on the basis of the summary of their activities, and sometimes you see some sponsored feeds, and these type of posts are paid posts, and there are categorizations according to our individual activities. For example, when you are running out of toothpaste, depending on your search history on the internet, then you see some advertisements on toothpaste. So it is so detailed, it is so complex. And then the better customized posts, the more attractive post, and the maximum profit for the producers. This is why they work on customization. It is, of course, related to political view, and also even ethical values are subjected to such categorizations. Maybe it is the easiest task of categorization in this respect. As you know, political parties, media outlets provide this data, and then they make their propaganda on the basis of these data. As in the case of toothpaste advertisements, you can receive a political message just because you are interested in that idea, in that position. Propaganda sometimes is observed in the form of fake news or quasi-fake news. Some news is missing information, which also feeds these type of issues. And these tactics are so strong that, as we know, when Trump was elected, of course, as in the case of Russia later, and Turkey is also using such tactics, this disinformation has never been at so systematic level. And as you may remember, in the past, there was a headlines that was saying Atatürk's house was burned down. These type of entries, what type of impact we can see from this type of fake news or disinformation? Because in the short run, everyone becomes suspicious about what he or she reads, which we call it conspiracy theory, and we always think about these issues. In the long run, we lose confidence in all public institutions. And who is benefiting from these suspects being suspicious? Those who are not clear, and those who are clustered or polarized in these echo chambers. In this condition of volatile truth, on the one hand, it undermines the oppositional forces. On the other hand, it enhances the ruling party's position. Of course, journalists are working as fact checkers for fake news, and they are making efforts against a huge and strong stream, because all these search and also your internet activities are recorded, are monitored, surveilled. So the more you are dwelt in echo chambers, the more you receive such fake news, then the more you read, the more you click on. As a result, platforms make more money. That is the way of stream. I'm sure you heard about Cambridge Analytica, which revealed many issues. What happened at the end? People become more consciousness about their activities, and their fake news were revealed. And fact checkers, and also blocking website, and also censorship upon applications became some issues. And what about if there is any suspicion about the information from credible organizations? Because there are points to manipulate people, and also state and governments do their best. All their activities are recorded to make predictions about their future activities. For example, 9/11 attacks. We were forced to make a choice between our security and freedoms. And then we gradually accepted mass surveillance. But then it turned into capitalism in the period of time. And following the COVID-19, we are being forced to make a choice between our health and also our freedoms. For example, the application called HAS. Now there is a more progressive application areas. It began in flights first, then it was scaled up at other public spaces. As Balibar stated, there is a new introduction of biological passports. So all these data are stored, and we have some challenges and also suspects about the confidence in public institutions. These activity feeds, which is managed and controlled, is problematic, as I said, and also it leads to exponential power accumulation, like big companies. They are more powerful companies than some other companies. And we are not able to leave, and we cannot change as a result of our protests. So we are in a difficult condition, but there is always a possibility of another world. And I would like to talk about data commons, because we are talking about city movements, urban movements, and some other organizations that are also collecting data, and they are publishing data where governments do not have. For example, as in the case of the Occupational Health and Safety Assembly, which are collecting data about occupational accidents. And also Truth and Justice Center is collecting data about enforced disappearances, or Hrant Dink Foundation is collecting data about Armenian genocide. And also there are some other organizations which are collecting similar data. The Turkish Medical Association, for example, especially in the period of COVID-19, its committee of COVID-19, which is in charge of monitoring the COVID-19 period, is collecting such data. So such civil society initiatives are following issues are not a problem for the governments, because governments and international organizations may neglect these issues. When I say international organizations, I refer to UN or similar organizations. So they do not collect such data, they do not monitor such issues. Sometimes they intend to leave, sometimes they neglect and ignore such categories. And this situation makes the choices political. Which data should be monitored, which data should be surveilled. Although these are related, they are not able to be processed in an interrelational issues, and there is also asymmetry of data between these organizations. For example, although you may have much more information, then the party in question has more power to manipulate.
And regarding these different data, and we have to follow the intersectionalities and we have to build solidarity networks. And regarding these issues, we can form new networks and we can make it possible that everyone has a more holistic idea of the situation. I would like to share my screen now. I guess you can see it now. Imagine that there are different topics apart from each other. There are different agencies, associations working on these topics. They are trying to do their best. And among the topics they work on, these are not completely detached from each other. There are commonalities between these topics. And they cannot make it possible that these work hand in hand. If we could do that, we would have a very strong solidarity infrastructure. I would like to provide you a couple of examples. And in this project of media ownership network, maybe you have seen this before, and mainstream media like CNN Türk, Hürriyet, these are owned by Demirören Group. What happens here? In fact, in the dispossession process, we were focusing on government tenders, but in time we realized that media ownership is very important and we brought these two together. Those who win government tenders and who are engaged in media projects, sometimes what we call as palace media, is part of the process. Doge Holding is another example. For example, in a hydroelectric plant, they have partnership with Doğan Holding. Doğan was at one point a giant of media, and they are together in this project where we can see employment genocides, employment murders. So this is another area. These are the thermal plants, and we have the capital owners and the relationship between the banks. You see the Garanti Bank, İş Bank, Yapı Kredi, and all the banks you know are listed here. And which thermal plants they are funding. They give loans to. You can list it here. Let's zoom it on Akbank. This is a refinery, Star Refinery, and that it has harms to the ecology, and there are many financiers of this. And Sokar Energy, this is an Azerbaijani energy giant coming to Turkey, and you see that there is a partnership with Goldman Sachs in monetary transfers. Zorlu Center is another example, partnering with Akbank. This leads to Zorlu energy and to thermal plants. You can in fact see how many megawatts of a production is there. I will provide a last example and then conclude afterwards. This is a study on city hospitals, and it is a relationship of dispossession and the projects and the tenders that are responsibilities of capital groups. Normally, this is not some information you will see in a news piece, but this is more indirect type of a relationship that we are trying to understand. For example, Ministry of Health is at the center. Surrounding it, we have many city hospital projects. We see Türkerler Group, YDA Construction, Gürüş Holding, and Renaissance Group, Akfen, and we see the tenders for the hospitals being given to certain groups. This is a study by Deniz Group, a map published by this person. You can search it on the internet if you like. I provided you with concrete examples. This is all I would like to cover. Thermal plants, city hospitals, media ownerships are the buzzwords. If you use these keywords for your search, you will see the details. And in your own area of work, you have to take these dimensions into account while developing strategies and doing planning. I don't want to get more of your time, so if there is discussion and if there are questions, I would like to take those. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we are so used to listening data and how this data makes us prisoners in this new order. How can we free ourselves from this process, and how can we use data more effectively? You showing us this dimension and bringing about the power relationships was very valuable. And we understand how important it is to present the data like this, especially during this moment in time. Those who listen to us might ask their questions, and at the end of the session, we will share these with our panelists. Our second speaker is Kayhan Pala. I will briefly provide information about our professor. He graduated from Uludağ University School of Medicine in 1988. In 1993, he completed his PhD in public health. Since 1997, he has been working at Uludağ University. He became an associate professor in 2004 and a full professor in 2010. He is a public health scientist, and he had conducted scientific work in this area. He was part of the work on the side of the environment. We know him from these efforts. And in the Bursa chamber of the Physicians Association, he was a general secretary, and also he was the president of the Bursa Physicians Chamber, and he was a delegate to Turkish Physicians Association as well. And we heard his name lately in a meeting that he participated for Turkish Physicians Association, because of which he was part of an investigation. And he will be talking to us about the struggle between the truth and the lie. So I will now give the floor to our Professor Pala. Thank you very much. In the time that is given to me, I will try to focus on my own experience and talk to you about the responsibility of a scientist. On the 11th of March, after the announcement of the first verified case, the pandemic had a fast course in Turkey. Both as a scientist and as a member of the monitoring board of the Turkish Physicians Association, I tried to talk about my ideas in different platforms, and there were monthly reports prepared by Turkish Physicians Association, and I was part of those reports as well. And in April, there was an interview with a media group in Bursa, and a day after that, the governorship of Bursa made a criticism of this. And my talk on TV was around 20 to 25 minutes. It was at the same time published on a digital newspaper, and governor's office uh, accused me of misinforming the public and also for directing the public to panic. So they went to the prosecutor's office with these accusations. What did I tell to make the public panic? This wasn't obvious. Let me elaborate on this. From my perspective, everything I talked about was based on evidence, and the governor's office did not make any reference to the comments I made openly. And the information that we obtained from different sources made me realize that my comment about there were more cases than announced was the problem. And once this accusation was made to the prosecutor's office, and as the governor's office accused me of misinforming the public, I was directed to IT crimes. The IT crimes department of the prosecutor's office could not find anything that would create a crime, and they sent it to the crimes for civil servants office. And this brings forward another accusation of abusing the power I have in my work capacity. This division of public servants crimes office regarded me as a civil servant, and they bring the issue to the rector's office. They try to open a criminal investigation, and a professor from the Faculty of Law is delegated this responsibility. And I was informed that a disciplinary investigation is initiated. This is a very complex process. And in the communication through which I was asked for a testimony, I could not understand what the real issue was. So the lawyers had the need to write a very important comment. The process being ambiguous makes our client, puts our client in a very difficult position. As I could not understand, they were expecting me to criminalize myself. And this was contrary to the Article 37 of the Constitution, which was understood through the process. One of the important concepts in the process is that the governor's office, the prosecutor's office, and the rector's office were not only focusing on myself being a professor at the university, but they were also focusing on my identity as being a member of the monitoring board of the Turkish physicians associations. And universities are not places where we see scientists, but there we see civil servants with academic ranks. For years, universities, I have mentioned this before in previous years, for most universities are places where we have higher high schools, let's say. And this is freeing them out of the responsibility of being a university. And this is not a place where we can talk about a real university education. And under the name of scientific investigations, many of these studies are repetitions of previous studies. And one of the important dimension is that academicians who are peace academicians signed a document and they were taken away from their jobs, and the university only acted as if they were audiences. This is maybe the biggest problem that brought the university away from the process. Independent scientists are only signing a document, and they are asking for peace. Because of this very demand, they are taken away from their jobs. And many people who claim to be academicians do not object to this, because under the appearance of an academician, these individuals wear cloaks that are specific to the university. However, we cannot name them as scientists, but as civil servants who have academic ranks. As the government saw that these people did not provide any objections, they thought that these people are covered by the law number 657, and they thought scientists will be forced to work in the same manner. And if us, myself, and many others, during the pandemic, talked about the truth, and if we had not done this, we would be behaving against the identity of a scientist. And these days, at Bosphorus University, we see both the students and the academicians resisting for a rector who has been appointed but not elected. And we have to respect this resistance. And I haven't done something that significant as a public health expert who is knowledgeable about epidemiology, who gives courses at graduate level. I was responsible as an academician. I was focusing on data available both in Turkey and worldwide. And through modeling approaches, I was trying to focus on estimates. And as a member of the Turkish Physicians Associations, I made the effort to share my findings. If I hadn't acted as such, I would have abused the rights given to me by this country, and I would have left outside all the values given to me. And this would have been a shameful act for a dignified academician like myself. In the field of public health in Turkey, most of the members are afraid of leaving their comfort zone, and they are misled by the idea that things are going okay. They are not making the effort to take reality in their hands. If they were to do this and they were to share this with the public, the governor's office would not have the courage to go behind myself. And if you remember what followed, time showed that we were right. And I had made the remark that there were more cases than announced, and those who objected to this, those who put me as a target and who attacked, afterwards realized that certain groups like the Ministry of Health even said that they had more cases than it was claimed previously. So in the past, we have not announced all the verified cases, Ministry of Health says. What makes this possible has to be considered. Certain journalists and certain media groups were seeking the truth, like myself. And other than trying to come up with a success story out of this pandemic, it wouldn't have been possible to share any real data. Thanks to the efforts of all, this was possible. They had to confess the reality that there were more cases than has been already announced. Together with a framework about how to govern the pandemic, we shared the realities. And at the end of my presentation, I will say a couple of more words and then conclude. Scientists had to search the reality in their area of expertise. And democracy, how good or how bad it is another topic of discussion. However, accountability and transparency are areas where we can contribute. And it is open to these contributions. If we are talking about a scientist, this individual has a responsibility to the society and to the individuals, and he or she has to be engaged in this effort, invested in this effort. As I conclude, on the 21st of April, I was telling you that there are more cases than being shared. And now I can say that there are more fatalities than reported. Different levels of evidence are there, and we have seen these as I shared on social media. As I conclude, let me bring your attention to some point. We scientists are focusing on estimates, predictions in our area of specialty, and we do share knowledge based on this. Why do I say that there are more fatalities than reported? The sum of certain data taken from the municipalities is higher than what is announced by the Ministry of Health. But there is also something dramatic. A couple of weeks ago, TÜİK, Turkish Statistics Institute, based on the system they have focusing on the addresses, and 13.9 per thousand of an increase was there in 2019, and this figure was reduced to 5.5 in 2020. The figure of 13 for an increase in our population was there in previous years. In the year of the pandemic, we have this going down to 5.5. What the truth behind this needs to be deciphered. This is a responsibility for us. And here, Ministry of Health until now reported 30,000 deaths And in this population growth rate, together with other movements, this cannot be explained. So we, in our own areas of specialty, have to respect ourselves first of all. And if certain people see us as scientists, or if we want them to see us like that, we have to pursue the truth and we have to continue this journey. This is an obligation. At the point where the investigation was initiated and when the results were not made available, I committed to continuing my responsibility. That professor colleague, together with the lawyers, said that we won't be making a defense because we don't think that there is something to be defended. And as this is a technical term, I say quote unquote defense. They then accepted it. I learned it afterwards. And this law professor of law was identified and they accepted our comments. And after this, the rector's office identified a commission consisting of 3 individuals, one from the Faculty of Medicine, one Faculty of Science, one from Faculty of Education, and they evaluated the report prepared by them. And after all of them said that what is claimed is true, then the rector's office decided that no further investigation was necessary. And the file was sent to the Supreme Court, and I have not heard from them further. Regardless of what the end result is,
we will continue to look after truth and we will continue to share it with the public. Thank you.
Hocam çok teşekkür ederim sunumunuz için.
Thank you for your presentation and also your final remark and also your efforts
cesaret eden
to make the truth known.
için diyeyim. Nilgün Hoca'ya geçmeden önce
Before I move to Nilgün Hoca,
yolunu onun tahmin ettiği gibi, yani bu toplantı yayınlanmaya başlamadan önce onun tahmin ettiği gibi biraz döşemiş ortaya olduk. Yani iki bilme biçimini
presentation will be
daha çok
based on the discussions that we already had.
İnsanları profillemesine ve ekonomik
data about profiling people from economic and political perspective, because these data are used to achieve coercion over people. And
başka bir bilme düzeyinde, bilimsel bilgi düzeyinde
also stated that with this knowledge,
siyasal iktidarın
telling the truth and also being brave to tell the truth. I think Nilgün Hoca will focus on the first presentation, which is about the uncertainty, which we are not able to define it as lie because we are losing the truth. Apologies for intervening in your area, but you will talk about also the political results of this issue. Professor Dr. Nilgün Toker was dismissed from the Department of Philosophy at Ege University while she was serving as the president, as the head of the department. She was dismissed from her position on 7th of February for signing the peace petition. She is a founding member of the Human Rights Foundation of Turkey and also the ethical board of the Turkish Medical Association. She is the co-editor of journals, and before the undergraduate of philosophy at Ege University. She studied math at METÜ, but she stopped. Then she went to Paris to complete her PhD. And Nilgün Toker is a human rights defender. I had another chance to introduce her. And she is also a feminist academic. She is the one who taught that concept. She is a human rights defender, as I said, and also a philosopher. And I'm pleased to be with her in this session. Yes, the floor is yours. Thank you, Dinçer. No one introduced you. Let me introduce him. He is a colleague of mine, a comrade of mine, because he was also dismissed from the Faculty of Political Science at Ankara University, so he is a friend of mine. But even before he was dismissed, we were friends. And then, following these dismissals, we reached a new level, which I call comradeship. And Kayhan Palan made a very important definition by saying that those who are still at universities and those who were dismissed. I will talk about this issue. Kayhan Hoca refers to people who are still at universities, and he make a distinction why some people are not academics, because being a scholar is not an easy task. It is related to the period of challenging tasks. And the other panelist, Burak, also referred to discourses which can be concealed, which can be built, are also extraordinary. It is about, because he says, what is built on the basis of representation is important. And also Kayhan Hoca makes huge efforts which deserves to be appreciated, because their insistence on making the truth available and known is important. I need to think about what is lie, what is there, and then I will also talk about how to build the truth. Etienne Balibar, who was the panelist of the former session, he is a philosopher, and he did take the most challenging task, because while something is still happening, while it has yet to be completed, it is very challenging to define it, to discuss it. And making distinction, all these issues is very difficult, and I learned a lot from him. Of course, I will try to do the same, but I'm not Balibar. I'm not a philosopher in his sense, so I will discuss some other concepts. Both Burak and Kayhan made contributions to this panel. On the basis of their remarks, there is an attempt to conceal the truth, and there are people who are searching into truth on the basis of evidence and proof. Of course, in the case of Burak's presentation, this new concept is the new form of the world. I try to understand both, but we know, let's agree on that. States always lie. They always conceal something. They conceal their actions, but this new form of lie is about concealing. And also, this lie can be caught, maybe not always, but usually can be caught and can be revealed. And whenever it is caught, then there is this scandal. And as Kayhan Pala stated, there is a map of turquoise, and Kayhan Pala and his colleagues insisted on the fact that these figures are not accurate. And later, it was proven. Of course, it could have been caught at that time. And from political perspective, we call it as being caught. I recently learned, I'm not familiar with economy, but these oppositional parties and also economists talk about some amount of money. I don't remember the exact amount of billions of US dollars, and they are trying to chase where the money has gone. And there is a slogan, where is the son-in-law, referring to the president's son-in-law, and where is the money? Then the president made a statement, said the money is not lost. We spent this money for COVID-19. And the opposition parties are making calculations, and if I am not wrong, it is maybe 1 out of 1,000. So can we say that Tayyip Erdogan was caught? Can we say that we made his lie revealed and known? I don't think so, because this type of lie is not an issue that you can catch, which I'm interested in today. Of course, I don't mean that we must stop insisting on truth, but what I'm saying is it is not possible to catch this new form of lie. It is not new form of lie, let me call it, since we are in the form of post-truths. This form of lie is a pattern that is specific to fascism, and it also reveals the characteristic of the period. This discourse, which Burak also referred in the sense of representations, it makes distinction between what is true and what is wrong almost impossible. And it also prevents us from questioning and also discussing it. So it is also eliminating the difference between belief and also knowledge. And it makes something which is not approved by everyone, but truth is defined as a discourse which has been replaced with lie. So it does not conceal the lie, but it has been replaced with lie. So it is not possible to be disproven, and it is not possible to catch. It's not possible to seize it. And this is the atmosphere where we observe such lies. When we think that truth has evaporated and it is volatile, then we think that there is a new form of truth. And let me be clear, the truth that we are looking for, and also to the truth that is accepted by everyone, and that is also convincing, and that is what we are looking forward. But on the other hand, this truth of post-truth doesn't need to be approved by everyone. Its power comes from its originator. There is no need for convincing period. It relies on dependence obedience, which we know. And I will talk about all these issues. And when truth get lost, in fact, what I want to say is, in this period, that truth has evaporated, and it is the period of volatile truth. There are too many people who hold truth. There are so many people who hold the truth, but it is not an absolute one. In addition to that, it is not about elimination of your opinions. It also eliminates negotiations and discussions, because discussion requires questioning, and much more importantly, it makes knowledge relative, which is an issue that Kayhan Pala criticized, in the sense of academics who are claiming that they are genuine scientists, while the society is making decisions about what actions that the society will take. And if you close the space of negotiation, discussion, and questioning, then knowledge will lose its status. So the academics whom Kayhan Pala referred are not interested in this type of truth. They are in a position that relies on obedience. My question is as follows. How is it possible? While we try to understand what is happening, we should ask a question that we never forget. What has happened? What is the reason for all these problems? Is it something that we are dealing with a crisis? Because it goes beyond the crisis. It is a depression. Maybe Bolivar was right, because it is a decade of moral problems. So we should ask why. And let me ask it in a clearer way. This form of lie, which is specific to fascism, and how come it has become a global phenomenon? So, while we are dealing with all these issues that surround us, while we try to understand them, we should be aware of the fact that this form of lie prevents us from asking the question why. And our individual experiences and such particular experiences should be questioned. So there is a serious uncertainty. So we are talking about maths, numerics, and all these issues were invented and were created to understand what's happening. And language is another tool to understand. However, when these symbols and representations cut their relations with facts, then we move to a totally different world. And there is a revolutionary moment behind this movement, because experience comes first before concept. That's how Kant defines the situation, the concept, because he was trying to justify in an intersubjective way about what we have experienced, but is it a common experience that we can achieve our conscience? So in a world where experience comes before concept, then we are talking about this public space. So our experience meets with the experiences of others, and we were trying to reach such an experience, and there was a cut. It is a fraction because it's a differentiation, sorry. Fraction is something different. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I need to explain some issues. I think taking too much of your time is a specific issue to philosophers. What we are talking about, the new form of capitalism, which is something new, and we commonly know that it moved from manufacturing to consumption, production to consumption. And I don't want to say labor disappeared. I'm saying labor became invisible. And consumption and what you consume are related to representation. So expansion of market and this fluid capitalism, I am not going into details, but I think it's an important development because manufacturers, the subjects of producers who define their position, they embrace this issue and they get slower. And I think it's a very important distinction. Because a person who defines his or her activity within the production, then it is a collective issue. I'm talking about all forms of labor.
But then you have to define in a very atomic way, closed to yourself. This brings about a very grave consequence, and it results in the dissolution of all common bonds. And the most important of these is the concept of citizenship that dissolved. And class, we rediscovered it thanks to the pandemic. And the most important of all, if what you generate is not an opinion that can be shared, and it can only compete, the representations can be shown to each other. So how can all these individuals who are rather atomized exist together? Their coexistences have dissolved. The only thing that will bring them together is an attachment, being attached to somebody, to the government, let's say. And there is a philosophical consequence of this. And all of a sudden, the concept of perception changed here. And very individualistic lifestyle of ours. I am not talking about perception as a thought process, but rather focusing on emotions. Quote unquote, in my opinion, or if you ask me, is not something that is opening to others, but this is opening to the world of consumption. We are as if living in a nominal world, and everybody's truth is different. And any kind of particular thing is real or true. And our search for truth cannot be shared, and it is defined as being mine. This type of idea was at its highest during the medieval age. And now, if the perception is not a thought, but rather transforming into an emotion, then the generalization that the truth needs to harbor is coming from a will, like an authority or a god. And if it is turning into an affection, then there is no area of negotiation, because there is no sharing in between the affections. You can only understand somebody else's affection, which we call empathy. I would like to talk about Spinoza and the affection theory, and the desire is in fashion. And nobody is dealing with the daily materialistic dimension of this. And this is an extraordinary theory. And he is a philosopher who says we are obliged to be free. Let's greet Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu and say that living is resisting. Otherwise, you don't exist, Spinoza says. However, nobody approaches Spinoza from this perspective. He's popular from the perspective of affection nowadays. What this points out to, let me reiterate, we see all the bonds disappearing, all the collectives dissolving. We are living such times, and every era has a regime specific to itself. And fascist dictatorship, I call this. And in Turkey, we are experiencing overt fascism, I think, after the decisions I heard about today. You can regard this as an affection from my side, maybe, based on today's experiences. How does this work? Not having any institutions, not having any public space, closing the public space totally, closing the negotiation space, and causing any area of rights. And the most important dimension, which I am involved in, is the partnership is with fascism and the ability to create ambiguities. I'm aware that I do not have any time left. What is creating ambiguity? I'm not only talking about an ideology that is fluid or not being able to make any legal predictions, but rather having all the definitions get vague and not being concrete. Truth disappears, and by its disappearance, with this network, you can build something that covers everything. And this can only be created by will. Instead of rights, you can give privileges. What needs to be done? Let me find an answer to this. One, you need to be Kayhan Pala. You have to be telling the truth. You have to persist. And you need to be Burak. You need to show what type of a construct this network is. I might call you many Buraks or many Kayhans, but the most important of all is that we have to insist on building our willful partnerships, and we have to reconstruct a public space, and there needs to be a foundation. We have to search for the alternatives, and we have to create areas where we can show our own experiences. The concept of being a citizen, being a physician, being a scientist, there are responsibilities attached to these definitions, and we have to put these into practice. And this will open the new path ahead of us if we succeed in doing this. I will conclude here before making Dinçer upset. Thank you very much to my dear professors. All three speeches were related to each other, and they inspired us to understand what happened today. There is only one question so far. Let me ask this later. First, I would like to ask something that I am curious about. Today, in these types of sessions, we did something that is not very common. Unbeknownst to each other, the speakers focused on what needs to be done. And there needs to be something to be done. And Burak suggested things that can be done. Professor Pala talked based on his own personal experience. And Nilgün talked about the importance of actions. What I would like to say here is based on Nilgün's atomized worlds. Her expression was somewhat different. In the world of particularities, there is a question we have been asking for a while. We did not start this today, maybe 2 years ago. I believe it was during a presentation of Alev Özkazanç. Is Turkey a society? There was this question. Let me reply immediately, no. So, this is not my question. At the time, I had the answer no. My question is as follows. Of course, by taking the previous question as a reference, in order to have a new foundation for Turkish society, what would the role of truth be in an environment where privileges and interests are supported by lies, in an order where we see privileges and thousands of individuals not abiding by the precautions for the pandemic and being part of rallies for the government. But on the other hand, an individual who is going to the pharmacy being penalized and being fined 3,000 Turkish liras. Everything is based on lies. So what will the role of truth be in this foundational activity? I would like to ask this to all of you, the three of you at three different levels. You can answer in the order of presentations. I believe you can hear me. In my opinion, the period we are experiencing, this is very systematic. The government exerts its strength in a systematic manner, and capital is also part of this. And it is more systematic, more automated than the past. A political party, for example, making surveys every month and building its discourse based on these results. I can in fact provide many more examples. What is in front of us is operating in a very systematic manner. We cannot change this by protesting, or we cannot go to the rural area and isolate ourselves. The only solution, I believe, maybe even getting further, is to accelerate and get systematic. And I believe we have to create our own outlets which would allow for solidarity and make accountability happen. And at least in my own area of specialty, the possibility is to have the data and analyze this data and connect the data to each other. At least from today's presentation, I wanted to contribute from this perspective. The platforms we create operate online. Once this is possible, the echo chambers will crack and the system will collapse. And systematically, we will be asking questions and holding people accountable. This is such a difficult question, Dinçer. The issue of Turkey is not a society should be approached from the perspective of the authority. We have to analyze this in detail. Belief, nationalism, ethnic origin, race, issues like these are still very functional in societies like ours to establish authority. From this perspective, a certain segment of the society, despite the fact that I agree with Burak, certain segments of the society cannot be influenced. We have to accept this from the beginning. So we put concrete on top of an Armenian cemetery. You might have seen this. This is a very good example related to the question of whether Turkey is a society. Whatever your belief is, whatever your religion is, if you have conscience, you have to ask this question, what you are doing. And I do not focus on the historical background, by the way. Under these circumstances, the issue of post-truth or meeting with the society at a point where we really need to be, I believe this is difficult. And one of the things that surprised me most during the pandemic was an online meeting with a teachers group. Somebody who said that he was a teacher asked a question and told me that what you say is right, very good, but I don't believe in this disease. They are just keeping the world busy with this disease. And this singular example was not singular, and we see many more examples on many platforms. From where I stand, this is concrete, has been proven by the microscope. Such realities, this type of a truth is not accepted by a teacher who has gone through an undergraduate education. And I believe at this point we need the guidance of Nilgün. And I already told you, people relate to the world through what they believe. I told you, what you call conscience is not something simple. It is the capacity to differentiate right from wrong. And it is a logical ability, and it requires thinking, deciding. And in order for you to do this, there needs to be a world that would allow for it, and your thought should be valuable. And this cannot happen by itself. In order for you to have an idea, this needs to have a counterpart. And in a world where you do not have a counterpart, because this is a relationship of equalities. And however, when there is a hierarchy, this relationship has been distorted, and individuals cannot have any opinions. And the capacity to differentiate from right from wrong has been lost. And we want these individuals not to believe and to be convinced, but I am not hopeful.
All fascist dictatorships can maintain their power through making people poor. So it is not a coincidental economic crisis. It's a policy of making people poor, because the more people get poorer, the more dependent they are.
Bu yoksullaşmanın da bir etkisi var. İnsanlar
and also this poor aspect of the issue makes an impact. And while there is poverty, no one will be interested in Armenian cemetery. However, for example, when Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu said, I am not going to leave the parliament, is something new, which is promising. We need to establish new systems, and there is need for new models, and also there is need for new words, new statements. Old words are not working any longer. And the digital world, I think, is very important. I cannot explain what is needed, but what I can say is there is something that should be done. If we want to destroy this coercive system, we need to think about how to change this current position of people who are holding the truth. We need to reclaim the truth. Of course, you claim something which is higher, but everyone is not able to do it. But I am optimistic that 51% of the society in Turkey is still claiming that they want to be citizens. And this type of absolute will is not desired by these people. I would like to repeat my colleagues, either Alev or Necmi, and I'm also saying that we are not a society any longer. I'm not talking about solidarity, which is important, but I am talking about collective production areas, because the students at Bosphorus University are telling something very important to us, and they are carrying out a common struggle, a joint struggle there. Of course, our paradigms are changing too. And we taught a lot about the value of being different. But today, we need to think about how to build commons, a common concept for everyone without ignoring differences. And it is an issue of making all issues public. I think we can manage it. I'm not going to say that the only way is revolution. Of course, revolution will not be something bad. There are some more questions. I will summarize these questions. You partly respond to that topic, but still, I would like to read the question. There is another important issue, which is being ignored. And ignorance, being ignored is important as lie is. I know that you don't prefer this term, but as you know, courage is also spreading and affects people. Is the solution solidarity? You partly respond to that issue. And regarding the solution, those who lie are able to conceal the truth because of their power. So can we change it? And can we make it visible through struggle and through attacking this term? And why do I don't want to use this term? Because these new regimes and fascism practices, and in also all dictatorship regimes, but all these regimes must be different from right-wing populism, because they have some relatively more rational desires and also plans. And nationalism, Muslim foods, and all these concepts exploit these people. That is the populism that I'm referring. And each populism, in quotation marks, are praising hegemonic styles, hegemonic values, and attacking or making values which are not hegemonic enemies. And marginalizing them. I don't think that they ignore LGBTI individuals. They want to destroy them, because if you want to ignore, then you do not care about them. But No, there is an attempt to marginalize them. There is an attempt to make them enemy because they want to destroy these people, as in the case of Academics for Peace. We can still take some actions, but how to overcome these issues? And how we, as Academics for Peace, overcame this process, and how, for example, can the LGBTI people can overcome these issues?
Bu benim hakkım demekten vazgeçmeyerek aslında
And
bir tür o
insisting on their rights, we eliminated the attack on our credibility because we didn't accept that Academics for Peace supporters are criminals, are marginalized. And if, for example, Bosphorus University students had said LGBTI people should stand behind so as not to be considered evil, it would have been totally bad for the total protests. Of course, we know that all these protesters are not LGBT individuals, but these protesters didn't object to these people despite the attempt to make them LGBTI supporters or even show them as LGBTI individuals. But I think it is very important. Yes, we learned it during the Gezi protests. And these type of terms turn into some tools to resist.
Yer verdiğinizde hep beraber hak savunuculuğu da budur, değil mi? Başka bir yerden konuşmaya başlar.
It is important.
Yersiz yurtsuzlaştırmasına karşı bir yeriniz olur. Bunun kadar
and whenever you are dislocated, then you have place to live, and we can still learn a lot.
Başka yolu yok. Yani
and there is no other way to fight against populism.
Karşı diğer değerlerin eşdeğerliğini savunmamız
gerekiyor. All values, we should say, these type of values are still valid. May I add something very briefly? Yes.
Bir örneği geldi arkadaşın sorusu üzerine.
Upon the question, I just reminded that, for example, during the Gezi protests, these anti-capitalist Muslims were able to pray because LGBTI people formed a type of
bir oluşum
shield for them.
Ayrımcılığının kaydını tutuyor.
Yani, for example, there is an initiative which keeps the data of discrimination against LGBTI people. There is another initiative launched by Aslı Hoca.
O da aslında
is keeping data
faili.
Of occupational
yani iş yerinde
they are keeping this data, and if there is a company which
bu dolaylı ilişkiyi kurduğunuz zaman
exerts discrimination on LGBTI people, and if there is an occupational accident in that workplace, then we can converge them. We can create commons. What I'm trying to say is, when data are combined, when data are examined together, then we find some intersections. And the more we expose such intersections, then the more we have solidarity. I think it is amazing. And intersections are critical to human rights struggle. We can define it as the struggle for rights. I learned and I understood.
Son iki sorumuz var.
Last two questions.
Yani Bolivar'dan artan zamanımıza biraz eklersek Yaklaşık da 5 dakikamız var.
We have about 5 minutes to finish. The first question goes to Kayahan Hoca.
Zor soru gelmiş. Demiş ki soruyu soran arkadaşımız, peki üniversiteler nasıl bu durumun içinden çıkarılabilir? Aklınızda...
Difficult question goes to Kayahan Pala. How to overcome these difficulties at universities? How to exit from the current situation?
Ben soruyu anlamadım. Bana tekrar edersin
I
değil mi
didn't get the
sonra?
question. Can you repeat the question for me?
Başka bir soru hocam. Bu soru üniversiteler nasıl bu içinde bulunduğu durumun içinden kurtarılabilir?
Tamam, anladım.
The question is how to exit from the current situation. And it is not possible to answer the question in 5 minutes. There is need for an independent session for this question. I think it is not about universities only. If there is a struggle to overcome the situation in Turkey, then universities will be part of it, and then universities will be the appropriate atmospheres. Universities will not be administered by rectors, but by the senators mainly. And as regards to the election of rectors, not only the academics, but also all other staff should have right to vote. That should be the style. Of course, it is not an easy task for Turkey. So, in the sense of isolated meaning of saving universities, will not work for Turkey.
Başına bugünküler gibi bir takım sıkıntıların gelmediği bir düzleme çıkaracak.
There is need for a country that elected people will not be troublemakers in Turkey. And if we achieve it here in Turkey, then we can save universities as well. I'm sure that we have academic cadres to achieve it. And I think the driving force is youngsters and also women, because I'm old enough. And if we had done what we should have done, then it could have been a totally different situation. And as our colleague Burak is explaining in a systematic way that there is need for solidarity networks. So there is need for a new mentality which should be based on how should I survive and live in this country rather than how should I live and reach, how should I live and go to a new country. And this intersections, it is also thought-provoking. Is new public spaces. A project that will eliminate differences. Do we need a new space in this respect? It is highly possible that the person who asked this question is a Marxist. I have never lived in the fact that these grand narratives ended and they are not useful any longer. But these grand narratives sometimes work, sometimes do not work, and this is the period that these grand narratives do not work. But the key issue is you can change the direction if you have a vision for the future. Because in order to change present, you need a vision for the future. And you can change it if you have the will. That is the only way. And that is the politics per se. So I'm not interested in whether it is a grand narrative or it's a minor narrative. Narrative itself is important, and justice is the primary guiding Because if we build the future on the basis of justice, be it minor or a grand narrative, then we can achieve it. But we must insist on search for the justice. And if we will build a new world for humanity, justice must be the primary force. Some people call it being a good person and being moral. I'm not a person who thinks with these moral concepts. But if one is looking for moral and being a good person, then this person needs justice. This person refers to justice because justice is not something vague. And while I was listening to Brock, I remembered my days of math department. So I'm using all these terms. And heading towards justice is very important. It's not something vague, it's not something that exists in vacuum. But you must have a vision for the future. Of course, if some people build this grand narrative, I do not object to it. And we can still tell our stories within these grand narratives. And Kayhan, we should not be unfair to elderly people. We can still do something. Of course, we should pay attention to youngsters and also women. You rightly said that there is nothing to get from universities. You are right. But while we were there, and these people were working at universities while we were there, they were not replaced with newcomers. But the very presence of us at these universities were sending a message that they were not free to do as they wish. And of course, we are not part of universities any longer, but we are still interested in these issues. So all our actions, all our activities can still determine someone else's space. I always defined myself as an academic, and I will of course continue to this. And while you close space for some people, we expand space for freedoms. Of course, all these prototypes were at universities while we were there. They were not so free while we were there, it's for sure. Because these people were public officers while we were working there. And while we were working there, we had our space. And we were responsible for expanding that space in question. This is the only way to expand. Because it is not logical to say that let's see the university first. Let's save the university first and then we will do that. Because the system based on the Council of Higher Education is problematic. It needs to be devastated, and I also feel responsible in this issue. I think you make contributions to maintain the space. It is not because of the quality of university, it is because of your own space. May I say something?
Teslim etmem lazım.
I should respond to that point to my colleagues. Why I haven't faced an administrative investigation, it is because of you, because of all of you, because of the Turkish Medical Association, because of the society. All of you supported me, all of you embraced me. It might be an unprecedented example in this sense. If there had been no solidarity at this scale, I could have been dismissed from the university. Therefore, I do not
sizlerin üniversite dışında
ignore this
kalmanızı,
reality.
hiç böyle ciddi bir sorun olarak görmedi. Tırnak içinde söylüyor.
But
O yüzden bizim
of course,
gençlere ve
these
kadınlara ihtiyacımız var vurgusunu yapıyorum. Onlar belki gerçekten bilim
good
insanı
members didn't think that when you were dismissed, it was not a big issue.
çoğunluğunu
This is why
akademik
I'm saying
anlamda
that
oluşturduğu
there is need
kişilerle
for
üniversiteden,
new people.
yüksek liseden başka bir şey çıkmayacak
This
kanısındayım.
is why I'm talking about higher schools.
Bizim üniversiteden atılmamız
So,
bir sorun oluşturmamış olabilir onlar için ama
Our dismissals may not create a problem, but when we will be reinstated, it will be a problem for them. That's great. Yes, I have so many dreams, says the moderator. Again, it is the intersection theory that Burak referred, and we need to build these
Değerli hocam,
solidarity networks. Thank you.
doyurucu bir oturumdu.
It
Tabii
is
bir teşekkür.
highly enlightening and informative. We have been listening to you for you, and I would like to thank our interpreters who have been working for us for hours, about 3.5
büyük emek verdiler. Bütün dinleyicilerimize
hours.
de
They work very hard. We would like to thank also our audience who have been listening to us for hours. I also would like to thank you all. But Burak, you should talk about this intersection theory more.
Size teşekkürler. Birlikte olmak
Thank you
gerçekten
all. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Sen orada inatla sürdür. Biz gelince hep beraber yıkacağız
So
oyunu.
you insist on there, and